Initiation by Elisabeth Haich. Chapter 3. My parents are not my parents. I was about 5 years old when one day at lunch, Father spoke about his manager. I was always interested in everything the grown-ups talked about, and so I asked straight away, Father, who is this manager? The director is the top man in the office, he answered. All the others have to do what he says. He is in charge of the whole office. But Father, you don't have to obey him, do you? He's not higher than you, is he? Yes, he is, Father answered. I'm not a manager yet, and so I have to do what he says. And Father explained to me what a director or a boss is. No, I refused to believe my ears. A manager higher than my father? How was that possible? Up to that time, I had taken it absolutely as a matter of course that the word father meant the great master over everything. He commanded everyone in the whole country and was responsible for all the treasures of the empire. His word was law. No one would dare speak up against him. He, capital H, he was the only being whom Father occasionally asked for advice, or once in a while he would discuss the affairs of the country with him, capital H. But that was something entirely different. He was not what we called a person, P-E-R space S-O-N. If Father is over and above all other people, how could he possibly have a manager superior to him? Now I looked at Father with the greatest attention for what was perhaps the first time, and while I looked at him and observed him very thoroughly, it suddenly dawned on me that this person, whom I loved very much, was not my father. Ever since I awakened to consciousness in these surroundings, I have become accustomed to the fact that I am here, that this beautiful, strange, blonde woman is my mother, that this tall, dark, powerful man is my father. Yes, here he is my father, but he is not my father. In my home, he is not my father. Only here where I am now. Actually, he's just as strange as this strange, beautiful woman, mother. Only gradually have I become accustomed to them. They are pleasant people. They love me. I'm important to them. And by this time, I have definitely come to love them. But they are not my mother and my father. I have come to call them mother and father only out of habit. Up to that time, I never thoroughly considered the situation. I accepted things as they were, as I felt happy with these people. They gave me security, they enjoyed my presence, and everything I did struck them as most remarkable, charming, and delightful. Under these circumstances, why shouldn't I have enjoyed myself in these surroundings? Even with Greet, I could sometimes play quite well, whenever she forgot for a moment that she was above me, because she was 3 years older than I was. Yes, everything was all right this way. Uncle Steffi came often, played beautiful music on her piano, and showed me all kinds of attractive things. He blew soap bubbles for me, and with his pocket knife, he made a little rattle out of a nutshell. On another occasion, he made me a little pig out of dried prunes and toothpicks. And once he brought me a tin box full of beautiful colors and a brush. I was only allowed to paint pretty, colorful flowers in a notebook, which belonged only to me. This time, I didn't even have to share it with Greet. Aunt Audie was charming with her many jokes and fairy stories. Grandmother, too, my mother's mother, was so gentle, so fine, always smiled at me with such a loving expression. I loved her very much. When we sat down at the piano, it was a holiday for me. She delighted me with heavenly music, and I was absolutely enchanted as I listened. Here I was in complete agreement with my tender, dear mother. She loved music more than anything else, just as I did. My other grandmother was a most interesting lady. She often told me about her many travels in foreign countries, and numerous times she took me with her to the National Museum. There I saw splendid things, wonderful, pretty, colorful, giant butterflies, which grandmother told me lived in some distant part of the world. Strangely enough, I knew them well. Then a number of gigantic stuffed animals. At first, I was terribly frightened, but grandmother calmed me. I also enjoyed it very much when my whole family showed great surprise and delight at all the things I did as a matter of course, and when our relatives spoke about my talents. When I was 4 years old, Mother showed me how to crochet with a bent needle. Then I crocheted a little dress for my doll, which always sat alone in the little armchair because I didn't know what to do with her. She was lifeless, and I was only attracted by what was alive. When I was finished with it, the little dress caused such a sensation in the family that I was really amazed. If Mother can crochet such beautiful lace, then why is it so remarkable for me to be able to crochet? My colorful flowers I painted in my notebook caused so much enthusiasm in the family that Father gave me a little piggy bank, and from then on, whenever I painted a beautiful flower, he dropped a silver coin into my bank. Oh, that was so pleasant, so pleasant. But now there came this terrible surprise, that Father had a manager above him. At that very moment, it became completely clear to me that I was here in this environment, and that I called this here home, and yet I was not at home here. Here, I was not in my home. That was my steadfast, unflinching conviction. If I had at the time my present knowledge and experience in psychology, I would have immediately analyzed how I, a child, could get such an idea. But I was still a child, experiencing everything in a child's direct way, and I was completely convinced that I had been dragged away from my home by force. I naturally did not know where I had come from, because in the meantime I had forgotten all about it. Who could explain it to me? Only the two people who called me their child. But I knew that if I were to ask questions, they would only give me once again one of their characteristic grown-up answers that I could not be able to understand. And once again, at the end of the story, would be, wait until you're grown up. Oh, how I hated that. Wait until I'm grown up. Why did I have to spend all this time in darkness, in ignorance? I wanted to know everything now and not someday. So I brooded over this question until evening and time for me to go to bed. Then Mother came and sat down at the edge of my bed and asked me, "Why are you so quiet? Why haven't you played with your doll again? And why have you wandered around our whole apartment daydreaming about something? Tell me, what's the matter with you? You can tell me everything, and you can ask me anything you want to." Oh, how I loved her with all my heart and all my confidence. She was delicate, sweet, beautiful. I often found that she stood up for me when somebody had criticized me. I could always run to her. With her, I always found a safe haven. Now, we were together so trustingly, and I believed that I could discuss everything with her. I put my arms around her neck, and I asked, "Mother, where did you and Father get me? Where did I come from?" At first I saw a little surprise in her eyes. She was even a little taken aback, and then she smiled lovingly and she said, "There is a great lake where all little children are swimming around. When two people love each other and pray to God for a little child, God allows his servant, a great stork, to fly to the lake and to fish out the little child that God has selected for these two people. Take the little child on his back and fly to them. Then he takes the little child in his long bill and he lays it down beside the woman, so the little child gets his earthly parents and becomes an earthly child. At first I listened with eager attention, but then I clearly realized that she was telling something like Aunt Audie did in her fairy tales. No, that is not the truth. She just wanted not to tell me the truth about how and where she and Father had found me. I was disappointed and I looked into her eyes inquiringly. Then she told me I should be a good girl and say my prayers after her. A moment later she said good night and left. I was all alone. From now on it became clearer and clearer to me that Father and Mother were not my true parents and that this country was not my true home. I knew that Mother did not know me. I knew that she did not see me. I was a stranger to her, and all these people around me seemed completely strange to me. We just did not understand each other. When I talked to Mother about things that were perfectly obvious to me, she was often so surprised and amazed that she would run to Father and tell him about the strange things I was saying. Father, too, was surprised. I saw that these things were new for both of them, completely strange. Later, they told all my relatives about my remarks and observations, and then they all laughed at me. What a strange child, I heard again and again. But I, for my part, did not find myself the least bit strange. On the contrary, the people around me seemed strange, and even though I loved them, I felt myself a total stranger among them. Everything seemed too little and restricted and colorless. Way down deep in my subconscious, I felt the overpowering conviction that only He, capital H, He could understand me perfectly, and I would have been happy to have been living in much larger rooms, much freer, and among people who at the very least were similar to myself. This feeling that I was a stranger and alone has never left me all my life long. On the contrary, it became clearer and clearer. I tried to find some kind of contact, but in vain. Mother spoke beautifully about the love of children for each other. It is so beautiful to have a sister with whom you can discuss everything and in whom you can have complete confidence, she said. I determined to create such a relationship with Greet, but she did not keep my confidences. She looked down upon me because she was 3 years older. When I told her something in strict confidence, she ran to Mother right away and told her all my little secrets. Thus all my efforts in my sister's direction were completely one-sided. Finally, I gave up trying to establish a relationship of confidence with her, and we lived side by side and yet apart, like two beings come together from separate worlds. Everybody was strange to me. Strange. Everybody. Time ran past with 7-league boots, and soon I was 6 years old. And then one fine day, Mother took me to school. I soon found myself among many children, and the feeling that I was alone and strange became even stronger within me. In my family, everyone loved me, and I loved them too. Love reigned above all, and everything else came afterwards. And that is why, even in this environment, I felt at home. I gradually became accustomed to these people, but the school children were completely strange to me. They understood each other very well, but in their midst, I was like a little freak of nature. They were constantly amazed at me, and I at them. They laughed at me, and that hurt me deeply. They were always talking about all the things they had and showing each other all kinds of things, pens, pencils, erasers, and they all wanted to have something to show that the others didn't have. To me, that all seemed terribly boring and ridiculous. I was fascinated by books, fairy tales, music, and museums. The other children's eyes just popped wide open when I talked about these things, and they asked me very strange questions. They played with dolls and balls and hoops, while I was fascinated with a prism that made the most beautiful colors in the sunlight, and with a magnet that had been given to me by Uncle Tony, my mother's older brother. That was so mysterious. The magnet attracted all Mother's needles, and then her scissors got magnetized, and Mother had to hold down all her pins and needles to keep them from jumping over to her scissors. Yes, I wanted to know about the power that lay hidden in the magnet. Finally, I decided that the magnet surely must love the pins and needles the way my mother loved us children. After all, I jumped to throw my arms around her neck, just as the pins did with the magnet. I found that all so wonderfully interesting, but the other children laughed at me. I was alone. That winter, I began to take piano lessons. Whenever I played the different pieces of music, I had the feeling that somehow or other inside the music, there were the very same kinds of shapes and figures as those which Uncle Tony made with cardboard. He called them geometrical figures. I played one piece that just seemed to bounce out of little cubes. Then there was another one that seemed to have little points all over it, and little balls climbed up all these points. Whenever I went out with Mother for a walk in the city park, I was always awestruck by the fountain, because in its main jet I saw fairies and gnomes who danced and turned and jumped. And I saw that the dancing of the water in the fountain was music too. I did not hear this music with my ears, no. I saw it. I knew that it was music. For me, that was all perfectly obvious. But the other children at school laughed at me whenever I talked about it, and they said I was stupid. I did not know why. But the first time I heard other children playing music in our music school, I was simply astonished. What? Couldn't they hear how they were hurting the geometric figures in the music? The teacher said they were not playing in rhythm. It was just as if their heart were not beating in rhythm. And couldn't they hear when they were playing wrong? Oh, it was awful when they hit the wrong notes. It hurt my ears so much I wanted to scream, and they didn't even notice it. I looked at these children curiously, and I thought to myself, have they no ears? How is it possible? Are the other children not like myself? I thought that every child, and indeed every person, could see and hear as I did. But little by little, I was to learn that most children and most other people have very different eyes and ears from mine. And for this reason, they regarded me as if I were a freak of nature. And so I was alone more and more. And that's the end of chapter 3. Chapter 4 will be called Sunrise is Different. And hope you enjoyed it. Like and subscribe. Till soon.